Hi, y'all. It's Bridget Cutshaw with Real Things Living. Today, my guest is Pradeep Kumar Sacid- Sacitharan. Did I say it right? Or am I right? Good.
Perf-
I got close.
Perfect.
I think I
Very
added a
good.
French accent because my I mentioned that my mom was French.
Everything sounds better in French. So it's my even
Everything
my name. So I might say change my name to French now.
it does, but when you told me the proper pronunciation, it makes me think of France, and I was just there actually last month, so maybe that's why it's still twirling around in my brain. Um,
Yeah.
So you are based in the UK and you have a amazing background. I just quickly want to ask you, I know your background, you were in like a teenage gang, you didn't finish high school, and then you ended up being a scientist and won all these awards, and now you have this huge company. Can you tell me what motivated you to go from um, dropping out of high school to pursuing all these great things?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's no one single motivation. I think motivation and passion changes over time. For me, literally, I still say to people actually, I hate studying, but I love learning. Two different concepts.
Right.
Even when I had PhD students, I had students beneath me. I used to say, hey, two different concepts, guys, studying something and learning. Learning in the high school kind of traditional system didn't apply to me. So I'm not saying it's bad. I think there's no better system as of yet, but I do think we're in a kind of 17th century or industrial kind of revolution kind of English academic system. Maybe algorithms and AIs can sort us out, but that's another topic. So it didn't studying didn't apply really applied to me. So I went to sales, but I still had the kind of gang affiliations. Thank God, touch wood, I didn't make any getting in any legal trouble. I had weightlifting as a pillar, exercise as a pillar that got me out of trouble, gave me some kind of discipline. In fact, I owe a lot to weightlifting. And at 21, in 21, I did get into a real serious gang fight, which put me in a coma for 4 hours. Someone hit me at the back of my head. I always say I didn't see God or angels or anything of that caliber. But I said, the first motivation, if you call it motivation, was to change my life around because when I woke up in the hospital bed, I was alone, no friends, no family. It was just me. I'm like, what am I doing? So I made phone calls, and viewers can look at my other podcast where I talk about life is three things. It's a sales game, it's a numbers game, and a risk game. So I made phone calls. A lovely woman called Janet Hudson, not the American singer, but a lovely British woman gave me a chance. Polytech University, which you guys call a community college. From there, I just put my head down. And I managed to get to Oxford in 5 years. And then I went to Harvard in 7 years from being a dropout. And even during that time, I challenged the system. So, coming to your first question, at 16, I really wanted to change my life and just get out of the area and the people I was associated with.
I like that aspect. It's very common you be you can grow better and change once you get out of that environment. Is it kind of like is bubble the right word? Um, yeah, I think it's a good thing that you listened to that. You understood, especially after that incident of being in a coma. You're like, okay, I don't want to live like this.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
like,
and coming back to your point you made is it you are who you surround yourself with, and
yes,
sometimes as I say to people, that's where you need empathy. When you're a leader or when you look at the bigger picture, you got to understand everyone. I don't think they're born evil. There may be some biological traits in the head, or you can talk about the psychologist, but majority, I would say, but circumstances, surroundings, people, and the data that's coming into you is from a childhood is what kind of encapsulates your possibilities and limitations most of the time.
right.
No one has a career. I look back and the kids now when I go to school. By the way, I do these things because I want to make an impact, share my story, and I go to kids, schools, and these podcasts and say, hey, what do you want to be? I said I didn't know. Like no one in my family had a career, no one around my area or in high school or my friends. We didn't even. It sounds strange, but we didn't know what college was or university was. And it sounds absurd now to my circles that I associate with now. But yeah, coming back to your point, you're in a bubble because you are born or you live in a bubble, and it's up to us to kind of poke that bubble and kind of burst it and see, like look in, like it's like Narnia in a wardrobe. You open the wardrobe, it's a whole it's a world, and every world has a new wardrobe, and there's different levels to it.
That's so true. And I think, like I said, you're very brave, and I think a lot of people are afraid of change. I think that's always, but change is constant. It's always been around for millions of years, and we have to learn how to adjust to it. And you did. You figured it out for you. Did you, as you were talking on, do you have any siblings around? I didn't know if you had siblings.
Yes, I had a younger brother. We're 7 years apart in age, but I have a younger brother.
Right. And that was something that probably maybe you wanted to be a role model for him, right? I would say.
I think at that time I didn't think about it. I just wanted to do something for myself, to be very honest.
Right.
But looking back, hopefully I'm a role model. And by the way, can I come to this point? It's an interesting point, fascinating point that sometimes I touch upon is that in the hardest of times, and there's four. I call myself a serial dropout. I dropped out of the system 4 times in the hardest of times when if I'm running a marathon or lifting weights or trying to get into academia or researching a drug or facing bankruptcy and debt, I don't think it might be me, but I don't think about my loved ones. I don't think about having an impact. It's about the immediate goal and survival. So if it's 40 kilometers and I have 2 more kilometers to finish in a marathon, it's about getting to the finish line.
Right.
Then I might relax and think about, what's the legacy, who's thinking about me exercising, am I being a role model? And sometimes I think we lose that in translation when people say, hey, I'm doing it for loved ones and stuff. But sometimes I think when you're in the midst of things, you've got to do it for yourself first. And you've got to accomplish those tick boxes because you can't use others as a board or a mark for an excuse or not. And it sounds weird to say this, but I always say you got to be selfish to be selfless.
That's true. It's true. You have to be. And you listen, I think you listen to your instincts too. A lot of people ignore them. A lot of people don't believe, they think it's cheesy to listen to your body or your instincts, and then you were in a survival mode and you survived and you're thriving. And I love the aspect of, you mentioned challenging the system. And I think that's what helps people think differently. I think we should be open to different perspectives, because just because they're doing it one way doesn't work for everybody. And I think it doesn't. And I think that's like with the medical field or in the health field, in the past, they're just pushing, this is one solution, but it doesn't work for everybody. And I think that's the way from my experience as a patient, just you've got to ask questions, and everybody's different. And I love the data that's being captured now and helping find solutions for people. And they mentioned earlier that you're an author and you wrote a book about how to improve your gut health, and that's related to everything. So what interests you in that, to get involved in that, the health aspect?
Yeah, so towards the end of my career in biotech, I was doing research into medicinal drugs to change your gut.
Right.
There's some very good evidence. Well, there everyone knows now. Actually, to be honest with you, this gut microbiome fashion or trend, it's been here for thousands of years. The Greeks and the Egyptians knew about it for
Right.
ages. So it's nothing special. We just got more sophisticated with our science and measuring things.
Yeah.
So we're discovering drugs and seeing how we can tap into the microbiome, which is harder than you think. It changes over time. So when I left the science field, I wanted to give back. One of the earliest way thought I can give back is making science available to the general public. And interest is for most people around the world is food, no matter what culture or background. And gut health is important. So I thought, let me write a book that's very, very basic in terms of understanding, and I kept it very basic. So that's what my interest is. But I just was in another podcast and I said to people, hey, there's no one way around this. You got to experiment and
Yes.
eat different foods, go on different diets. Don't think one diet is extreme or this diet is balanced. Just go for it for a week or a couple of days, and get fine in tune with your body, and then see what works for you. And
Right.
that's very important. And also, um, certain things don't work for you at a certain age, but they might do when you're older, and also at a different body weight as well. So I went through my own weightlifting kind of big guy, marathon runner, slim guy kind of transition, and different foods and different intakes of fluids work differently as well. So I'm a big believer in experimenting. Again, don't listen to the gurus and the systems, and just work it out for yourself.
Right. That's kind of like for me, everybody talks about how great coffee is for you. I can't drink coffee because I will go run a marathon. You know what I'm saying? That it's just I naturally have, I believe, naturally higher metabolism. Is that the right word?
Yeah,
And caffeine is just not good for Bridget. And
yeah,
it's just not. And that's something I learned over time. And so just I've always craved vegetables. Well, that must mean I need it, right?
yeah,
That's
yeah. And
that's
maybe your caffeine. I forgot the receptor's name. I just and then someone's going to correct me. Receptors might be sensitive. You might be sensitive your receptors to caffeine
yes, my
compared to others.
receptors. Yeah,
Yeah,
and if I do drink it, I don't get the jitters. I just get really jacked up. And and it affects my sleep. And how important sleep is, and how, what you're putting into your body, and everybody is different. And I didn't think about that, how it could the food based on your age. And I didn't think about that aspect. And as I've aged, I think a lot of people are experiencing this now that we're getting older. They're finding out what
yeah,
if eating so much of like dairy affects a lot of people as they get older. That's my understanding.
yeah. Yeah, so I think it depends on who you are. It's fascinating that a lot of the scientists or the gurus kind of simplify certain things, but they don't explain in detail. So I think
Correct.
age itself is a very important factor, and obviously, your metabolism closes down. But if you look at the Scandinavian countries, they might be more inclined to digest meat more than other countries
Right.
because evolutionarily, meat might be more available to them compared to greens and other things, and even dairy as well. So it really depends on the region and how old you are, depends on your genetics as well.
That's true.
And that's very important. So again, I'm not one to tell anyone what to do. I think you got to experiment, and we live in free countries that allow us to do so. So we should rejoice and take the opportunity.
I like that you're mentioning it's you got to experiment with it. And not tested, I stopped eating dairy over 10 years ago, and I felt so much better. There's something, it made my body hurt.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think,
you
but
might
it
be
wasn't when I was
intolerant to
younger.
something.
That's why I was saying I didn't know if it had something to do as I was aging. It I never was huge into cheese, right?
Mhm.
But I stopped eating it and drinking, and it's like, oh, that's bad for you. You need it for calcium. Like, well, no, I can take other things for cal. I mean, that's how I saw it. And
Yeah.
I did to help me understand it. I did get like certified in nutrition because I wanted to understand it a little bit better.
Mhm.
And they didn't say in this what I was doing not to have dairy, but if you have a sensitivity to it, to not eat it, right? And
Yeah,
I wouldn't say I'm allergic to dairy, but I'm sensitive to it for some reason, just like
yeah.
caffeine.
Exactly, and you got to work that out and fine tune it. And there is scientific evidence. Obviously, there's a whole literature on terms of deficiencies, and
Yeah,
you might be clinically deficient, and it's very important to address that. But if you don't go without certain things for a while, I think the body will kind of learn to adjust and fine tune and
right.
bypass certain systems. Obviously, don't it doesn't mean you ignore your fruits or vegetables and
Oh
kind of
yeah,
a balance kind of. But I think people make too much of saying, "Hey, this is the our ROI recommended intake, and this is what we have to do," and so forth. You know, again, it's highly individualized and circumstance. It's different for everyone else.
and it's different. Like for the state that I live in, even though I was going to help people try to learn, I couldn't advise people to talk to them or coach them on nutrition, because the state I live in, you have to be a registered dietitian, have a degree in it. And so I never did, but I did it to help me and it helped Bridget. And I try to
Yeah.
be, people are shocked that I don't have dairy in my, but I feel better. So that's kind of why, but I find other ways to get my
Well,
calcium,
you
vitamin
have
D.
the freedom of expression. So you can always go on YouTube or any other channels and say your knowledge out, and it's up to
I
someone
should.
else to listen. Yeah,
I should do
you
that.
should.
That's kind of why I've done I look at more of a patient advocate, because I think medical doctors, they're overwhelmed right now. And I think the nurses are really helpful, but they're overwhelmed too because of what has happened. But to me, it's just like you said, I like the word experimenting and trying different things to find out what works for you. If some people can't afford to hire someone to help them, to go through that. And I like to share that info. And I know I'm talking a lot about gut health.
That's fine.
It's so critical. And I love that you wrote that book. I'm going to get that copy of that book anyway, because and recommend
It might be your highly educated area. It might be very simple for you. So
it. It's okay. It's
okay.
okay. But I just want to people. I also lost weight too when I stopped eating dairy. And
Mm,
I wasn't trying to lose, I was just trying to feel better. So apparently, I think your immune system is constantly, if you're sensitive to something, it's constantly fighting that, right?
yeah,
And
the inflammation,
I've had
the
cancer.
inflammatory responses. Yeah.
I've had cancer a couple of times too,
Oh no.
but it's all related to, I'm not saying it's not in my genetics, so it's environmental, right?
Mm.
And for me, and it doesn't run in my family, but I caught it and I asked questions, and that's why I knew I had to. I'm not saying dairy caused my cancer, but it wasn't helping my body fight cancer. How's that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's your gut instincts and what you think and what you believe, and you got to go with that flow.
Right,
Again, as I said, in different aspects of life, I really challenge the system, and you got to go with that. Hey, this is the truth. I kind of see the truth in that tunnel at the end, and I know a lot of people with much who are brighter than I and more experienced are telling me not to. But I'll listen to them. I won't be arrogant, but I'm still going to go to that truth because it's kind of telling me that it's there. But you got to be very self-reflective of that truth and say, why am I reflecting on that truth alone? Where is that data coming from? And am I not individually biased?
right,
That's the question you got to ask, because then it becomes the absolute truth for you. And that's what I think works out.
right. It sounds like you're just doing so much good stuff for people, and you have a lot of different interests. And so you were in uh, were you in a corporate job and then you started your own business, right? How many years ago was that?
That was 3 years ago.
Okay.
So, yeah, I dropped out. The first dropout was high school. Then I went into academia, went all the way to the top. Then I dropped out of academia because my professors said it'll take 30 years for three of my ideas for experimental drugs. I said, well, I don't have that time. And, by the way, Richard, these are Nobel Prize winners who are much brighter than I. And see, even they, with all their IQ, they're in a system. So you do a bit of research, you go and ask for funding, you come
Yes.
back. And by the way, that's how you do it. But I said, hey, there must be a way to accelerate this. So what I did was, everyone knows it from other 272 phone calls. I landed in China. So I dropped out the traditional academic journey of 30 years. And those drugs I discovered in 18 months. I had a bigger budget in China with a workforce as well.
Wow.
So I went into that kind of system. Then my third dropout was from the academic and corporate system, and I went into business development in biotech, and that was my corporate learning curve. And then my fourth, and I don't know if it's final dropout, was from the whole career and corporate, and I started my own business 3 years ago.
That's awesome. I love that you did that. I started my own business, just want the background. I had a corporate job, and for many years I was an independent contractor. But then I went back to corporate. Oh, I need to do this, right? But then we had a private equity buyout for my division. A lot of people were laid off, and I was one of them. And then And then I got cancer again, like 3 months. So I'm
Mm.
like, okay, I'm just going to do my own thing. And my clients, and I needed that because right. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to not do what everybody's telling me what to do. I think I have an independent mindset, and you definitely have one as well. But I think that's what helps you move forward and
Yeah,
and and be successful. And you had this passion for it's okay to drop out, right? I mean, you shouldn't. I think it's kind
yeah.
of funny, the humor, the dropout, but you got out of the system. You challenged it, and look how successful you have become in 3 years. And it does help. You probably had some good. You learned from those other roles, though, right? Is that really what it is? You
Yeah,
learned from
definitely,
it.
definitely, definitely. So from 16 to 21, when I was that uneducated kid, life was teaching me sales. Although we didn't have much money to travel, what London gave me was an opportunity to work in sales in central London. So I was working in shoe shops, fashion shops, bars and clubs and pubs. I was learning sales and I was learning people, and there were people all around the world coming into this place. So I was learning nationalities, languages, so it's life experience. And I always reflect back and say, there's two Pradeeps. There's a kind of a street smart hustler Pradeep, and then there's the kind of Oxford Harvard Pradeep. And both brains are fighting. And usually the big decisions, the risky decisions that paid off are from the street smart Pradeep. Um, because that's our instincts that's needed. And so yeah, every experience is a kind of a learning curve, and it all comes together. And plus, when you drop out once and you survive, it's like, oh, I've been in deep water before, I can swim, so let's keep going.
I like that analogy. And you definitely, it kind of ties in. You mentioned earlier in the conversation studying versus learning. And I think learning should be more important. And I think that's why a lot of people find school to be boring if they're pushing the studying aspect. And I like your analogy of your street Pradeep versus your Harvard Pradeep, and the street Pradeep actually succeeds because he's not afraid of risk.
Yeah.
And I that to me is a great takeaway. You've learned you even though you had these tough moments, you've learned from it. You built the resilience in you. And
Yeah.
people aren't born with resilience, right? I think it
uh,
yeah, it's you're not born with that.
no, I don't think so. I think I agree, you're born with a lot of natural gifts and talents. Everyone's different, bit like your gut. Everyone's different, but risk appetite and hunger and resilience, I think you have to learn on your journey. I
Yes.
really do. And a lot of people talk about hunger, ambition, but the number one thing I put on top from me studying the best, is probably less than 1% in the world of successful people, is probably risk appetite.
Oh,
It, yeah, you can have hunger and ambition, like everyone says, but it comes down to risk appetite. It really does.
I like
Um,
that.
so,
I like
so
that
and how
analogy.
much risk you're willing to take.
Right. And that's how, and if you fail at something when you take a risk, don't you just reflect on that and then what you learned, right? That's what I think is what you're doing.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And every rejection I have, I say, is a misconceived perception. So someone's perceived your idea or yourself wrong. It's up to you to go and fix it. A lot of the Western or the worldly view is, it's I'm individual. I'm allowed to have my expression and dreams and so forth, and that's totally true. I'm on your side, but you got to work with people, and if people are seeing you wrong, it's a perception problem. So you really need to go and fix it and change it and kind of go with the flow as well. So that helps
Right.
with resilience as well, because you teach yourself that you can learn and reinvent yourself.
That's true. And another thing I've learned over the years is to not take something like that personally. It's hard to do that, right? Because it puts
Yeah,
doubt in yourself. But that's kind of why maybe I would go for a run, right? If something like that would help me get over something. It kind of helps burn a little frustration, maybe. And
yeah,
you
yeah.
also need to pause before you react to something.
Yeah, I agree on both. Exercise and reflection is critical. The third thing, it might be very drastic but philosophical, is that, when you look at shame and embarrassment and rejection, failure, you've got to be critical and said everyone that's rejected you or going to laugh at you or the whole world, everyone's dead eventually.
Right.
I'm dead, everyone's dead eventually. So all their emotions and their reflections and what you think and feel are gone and it's timeless. If very few people capture history, and you've got to have a lot of luck to do that. The Einsteins, the Newtons, and so forth. You're just you're probably 80 years if you're lucky, 70 years. So that's the kind of bigger philosophical picture. When I'm down and I get rejected every time by the banks now. Even they're in a system. Even if no matter how successful you are, I always say you're in a system. You just have to keep going. Said, hey, you
I
can't think
like
too
that.
much because everyone's gone one day.
I kind of see you, I mean, in a good way, a rebel in a way. I mean, I think that's not a
Yeah,
bad thing.
yeah,
And I think that's good.
yeah. You got to be a rebel, but be in the legal
Yeah,
parameters.
illegal, right, in the legal aspect. But I just,
Yeah,
to me, I
a legal
visualize,
rebel. There you go.
right, I visualize, based on, creativity, and you're being very creative as well throughout your life. And
You have
and
to.
you were
Mm.
challenging the system and that, and your risk, you have a good risk appetite. And that's kind of, I like talking to people like you, because of that. It helps motivate and inspire other people because they have these ideas, but then they're afraid to
Yeah,
move forward, or they're afraid of, again, they got to get out of that bubble if they
yeah.
can, and not be afraid of that.
Yeah, it's a domino effect. The reason why I do these things, and by the way, when you quit certain things like career, it gives you time to do certain things you enjoy, which this is what I enjoy. I like telling my story, saying, hey, if I can do it, you can do it. And I want people
Yes,
to do better than me. And then if you do better than me, then around you, someone's going to pick you up and they're going to do better than you. And it's a domino effect, I think. And that's
right.
how, as a species, as we evolve and we progress on. And that's very important.
Oh, that is so good. I think you're being a guest on here is very, very insightful. And I know a lot of what you're talking about, but I'm still learning, right? And you've got to be open to that. And I think that is why I was really excited to have you on as a guest, because I loved your background. I like the you're challenging the system, but in a good way. I don't see it negatively, because that's how we make things better in the long term, like the domino effect, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So where can people learn more about you, Pradeep?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, Pradeep Kumar Sacitharan, my full name. I'm quite active on there. My YouTube channel is PK Sacitharan. My Twitter is PK Sacitharan. Instagram is PK Sacitharan. So it's my initial with my long name, Sacitharan. Just message me. I'm here to help and serve. I might be a bit slow on the reply, but usually I'm on point and I'll try to help when I can.
And
Or I'll try to point you the right direction.
right, if you'll help, you'll give proper feedback, and like, I can't help you, or I can help you, and here's what the next step is.
Yeah.
For those that are listening, I'll have the links included in the description of this podcast episode. And again, I love your sense of humor and your risk appetite. It just got me excited just because I love hearing stories like this, how you succeeded.
Well, you've succeeded as well. You battled cancer, you changed your gut, you lost weight, you went out of corporate job. So it's good
Right.
to
I survived.
think
I'm still
to
here.
talk to a fellow legal rebel.
Exactly. Well, thank you again, Pradeep, for your time. And thanks for everybody for listening.
Thank you so much.